We're learning as a schus for Shlema Filan Chaya Basarach. We're on Lamed Gimel Amid Beis, only a short 3/4 of an Amid behind. We're catching up. Darash Rabbi Yosef, about 10 lines from the top. Darash Rabbi Yosef, Brei de Rava, Mishmei de Rava. Hemik lo tefach psula. He says that if a person makes a hole in his doorpost, we have to remember the doorpost is really a mezuzah. What we call a mezuzah is the thing that you put on the mezuzah. But he made a hole in that doorpost that went a tefach deep into the wood, and he put the mezuzah inside. So it wasn't on the surface of the doorpost where we keep it, but rather was inset by a tefach. It's possible. Because it's not, you have to put it on the doorpost. You didn't put it on the doorpost. You put it underneath or inside. I'll bring you a riot. Like it doesn't make it it's covered over, right? We cover our mezuzahs. The casing that we put on our mezuzah is halachically meaningless, right? That's just to protect it. Really, what you need is the mezuzah itself, and covering it is not a problem. So even if it's
meaning the cloth,
right? Covering it doesn't mean anything. So even if you put it like a half a tefach behind the wood of the doorpost, it's still a kosher mezuzah. Doesn't make a difference what you cover it with. I'll bring you a raya. Hinicha bepatzin. Patzin is another word for a doorpost. So we understand hinich bepatzin. That means he put it inside the doorpost, like we just described. Or if he put after he put in the mezuzah, he bricked over it. He cemented over the mezuzah. If it's buried by a tefach, you need another mezuzah. But if it's not a tefach, then you don't need. So that sounds very much like the din we just said. If it's covered over by a tefach of material, it's not anymore considered to be on the mashka. And the Gemara, no, not necessarily. That's not necessarily saying the same thing. Kitanyahi, but Pesach she'achure hadelas. This is talking about a different thing. When it said hinicha bepatzin, so it's a complicated case. I think there's a picture of it where a person put two doors at the corner of a house, right? You have the corner, and he has two openings. But he has one door in the middle that can close either one of them. So that cornered post functions as the left side of one and the right side of the other. So the question is, he has to put on, assuming that that's, let's say, the right side of the main door. So he puts it on that doorpost. The question is, does he need a second mezuzah on the other side of that specific doorpost, since it functions as a door for the other doorway? If for the other half of it, the other side of the wall, where the other potential door is, where the doorway is, when he swings the door that way, that's also a door. Does he need another doorpost? Does he need another mezuzah for the other sides of that middle post? So the Gemara is saying that's what we're saying. If the hemek lo tefach, hinicha bepatzin, if he put it on that doorpost, im yesham tefach, if there's more than a tefach to the other side of that post, he has to put another mezuzah. But if not, one mezuzah will suffice for both sides. He doesn't have to put two mezuzahs.
Otherwise, you have to put two mezuzahs.
Yeah, that means there's no front or back of a mezuzah, right? It's all the same. It's a scroll. There's no back. So even if you put it on the side that's, let's say, facing the left opening, but if it's less than a tefach, it also functions as a mezuzah for the other side of that post. It's still a post, and it still has a tefach. Just like if it was buried in the post, it could be on the other side of the post, as long as it's less than a tefach. So it really is. That's really not. It sounds very similar to this din that we said before, but the Gemara is saying this is a slightly different din because it's functioning for two separate psachim. So maybe you would think you need a different mezuzah because there are two doorways that are being serviced by this mezuzah. That's what you have to tell it. Zok the Gemara, how could you say that it would say that when it says But it says in Yesham Hinicha Bepatzin, that's talking about this case. But it says also Pesach Shachar Edalos in Yesham Tefach Tzarach Muzacharis and Lav Enet Tzarach Muzacharis. The Bryce over there says this exact case. So I can say Yesham Patzin. If it's in the Patzin, Hinicha Bepatzin, that's what it's talking about. So Gemara Ketzat Ktani Enechanami. When it says at the end, the Pesach Shachar Edalos, that's explaining. That's an explanation of the first part of the Bryce. Malvin shel konim. I don't really understand this Gemara, to tell you the truth. If he made himself a room out of reeds, so reeds are like tubes and he used that as the construction material. He can open up one of the tubes of these reeds, right? The reeds are hollow. He opens it up, and he puts the mezuzah inside of it. He says that's considered to be putting it on the. I imagine what the chiddush of this is, that even if it's more than a tefach, that's considered to be putting it on the mezuzah. A hollow reed, the outside is not really the outside. You usually use the inside as well. I think that's what it means. This that we say he could put it into the reed, this is really a separate din. It's not part of the first din. He has to first put up the reed as the doorpost, but this is really true of every mezuzah, every mashkef. You have to first put up the reed, and then he opened it up and put the veinicha. Then he put the mezuzah in. If he cut it open, put the mezuzah in, ubsoif hamid, and then afterwards he put it in place to make it a mashkef, psula. Why? Tasav aloymin asli, as familiar to us from sukkahs. Just like by sukkah, you have to put the schach there. So too with the mezuzah. The mitzvah is not to have a mezuzah. The mitzvah is you have to put a mezuzah there. So if you first put the mezuzah on the doorpost, then you put the doorpost on the door, you did not place the mezuzah on the doorpost. It's tasav eloymin asi. It was created, but you didn't do it. And therefore you would not be mekayim the mitzvah of mezuzah. But Amarav, Hani Pischi Shimoy, these, Rashi says, these meshubastika, these flawed psachim, these flawed openings, Peturim and Mezuzah, they potter from Mezuzah. My Pischi Shimoy, what is that referring to? Pliyuar of Richumi v'Abiyosi, they argue about it. Chad Amar Bleslu Tikra. One says that it doesn't have the cross piece on top of the doorway. The Chad Amar, on the other Mefarshim say that there's no roof. And one says that it doesn't have the doorpost on the side. So it's hard to understand what the chiddush of that is. Obviously, if it doesn't have doorpost, how could it be? How could it be that it doesn't? That you would think? Why would you think that it should be a mezuzah? I mean, that it would be opening. So they say that it's talking about something that it doesn't have something that's really. Rashi says it doesn't have a doorpost per se. It has a de facto doorpost where there was a wall there and you took out the bricks and that left a hole, but it's not even. So that's the question. So we're saying it's not considered a doorpost. Sagt the Gemara. My pischi shimoy, Amar Rabba Bar Shila Amar of Tizda. Achsadra petura min mezuzah. An achsadra, which is Rashi explains, it's it's sort of like a carport. It's a building, a room that has three walls and a roof, but the fourth wall is totally empty. There's no wall there at all. But for a sukkah, that would be kosher. But as far as making a Pesach, that's not called a Pesach. That's just called an open wall, that there's no wall. You have to have a wall, then you can have a door in the wall. So, Achsadra Ptura Min HaMezuzah. Levisha Ein Laptzinin, it has no doorposts. It's just the wall's end. Hayesh Laptzinin Chayev. Practically Gemara, that sounds like if there were to be doorposts in this Achsadra, which I guess they sometimes had, it would be Chayev Mezuzahs. Those doorposts should not qualify for mezuzah because those are not doorposts that are meant for an entrance. Those doorposts are just there for a purely engineering structural reason to hold up the roof. Something that's there just for a structural reason does not qualify as a doorpost to mimchoyev mezuzah. Sagt man no, ene chanami. Hachi kamer. Afa pisha yesh lo mitzim ptura she'ena suina lechizuk tikra. What it means to say is, even if it has these doorposts to hold up the roof, that is only intended to hold up the roof, and therefore it's not mechoyev mezuzah. Amar Abai.
So what are we concerned about the top post? I mean, it says, I mean, the gates also need a mezuzah. Isn't the gate missing the top?
I mean, I don't know if you have to have a top. We really didn't talk about the top. What we're talking about is, you're talking about the last Gemara about the Shimoy, Piski Shimoy.
Yeah, that, and now we're kind of coming back to it, I mean, indirectly, yeah.
I mean, I don't know that a gate doesn't have a top.
So
I don't know.
So when the Torah says Visharecha, it means a gate with the top?
Let's see. I mean, there's Gemaras later on. There's other Gemaras that suggest that you can have something without a roof that needs a mezuzah. Depends on what it's used for. Like a chutzner, you'd have a entrance to a chutzner would need a mezuzah. I think I suggested otherwise earlier, but then I saw later on that wasn't correct. I think even if it doesn't have a roof. But we're talking about over here we're talking about openings. Right? We're not talking about the quality of the room that you're going into. First of all, it has to be a base dira, something that's used for residence. But there's a separate requirement of what the door itself has to be. That has to be a door into the house. If it's a window, right, you don't, even though whatever, it has all the qualifications, a window doesn't get a mezuzah. Only a door does. So these entrances that don't have, it sounds like if it doesn't have the top part, that's going to make it that it's not really a door.
Therefore, a gate's not going to require. Therefore, a gate's not going to require a mezuzah.
If a gate doesn't have a top to it, right? But you could sometimes have, you have a sort of like the OK Corral. Usually, very often they have something to hold the two sides of the gate together above head height. We can look back at that Rashi before. Pischi Shemoy Mukulkolin Ba'ashamim. They're flawed and missing. K'moy Zok and Ashamay Daminim Kedushin. Tikra a scoop elyon. They don't have this top piece, cross piece over the doorway. Shakvi mezuzas. That's the first shot. Lishnachrina Tikra she'ena bayis makura shakvi. A scoop elyon. It's missing altogether the whole roof. So then Taisus asks on that. The lesu tikra pirish makam sha pesach shoykef sham milmayla ve'ena shava elamei avonim minakipa even nechnasa ve'even yoytze. Yes, this is talking about it doesn't have over there I think is this the same thing? Yeah, he's saying that it just has a jagged bunch of stones, Taisus, but it's not really a formed doorway. Avonim bolters could go in Shine chayma, like the teeth of a wall. Ke'enza isa perkam the ervin gabisuko mashbish bekuntrish loshen achat the lesle tikra she'en habayis makura. Right, this is what we were talking about. If it's like a outdoor area or something that doesn't have a roof, kasha migara mishari chatzeris. This is what you were asking about. How is it different than the gateways to a chatzer? The chayavim mezuzah can have a parakam the yuma, like we said in yuma, that a chatzer can have a mezuzah. But that's talking about the roof of the building. We're saying that the building doesn't have to have a roof. But the entranceway, we seem to be saying over here, at least according to Rashi's first shot, that it does have to have a lintel, the cross piece on top over the doorway, in order to qualify that doorway to qualify for mezuzah.
So if there's no lintel, if the doorway goes all the way up to the ceiling, you might not need
the ceiling could qualify as the
ceiling will qualify.
Because you don't have to have a separate thing, right? You could have sheetrocked walls that there's no visible trim or anything. It doesn't have to be, the walls can be the mezuzahs and the top. But let's say it goes up to Shemayim, right? It just goes straight up and there's nothing on top of it. Then that would not be a mezuzah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So where were we up to again? Amar Abai. Hazina lahu espalide de beimar. I saw by the esplide, which is another word for achsadra, the beimar, the islu patzimi, that they had doorposts, but leslu mezuzah, and they didn't have a mezuzah. Kasava lechazik tikra hu davidi. And I thought the reason must be, like we said before, since that whole wall is empty, the only reason why the mezuzahs are there is to hold up the roof. That doesn't qualify as a real doorway. Meisve. Beis shar achsadra umerpeses. A beis shar, which is like a watchman's booth. Achsadra, what we've been discussing. Umerpeses, which is a porch. All these things need a mezuzah. So we see that achsadra does need a mezuzah. We just said an achsadra, since that whole wall doesn't have any real, it doesn't have petzimin, and even if it does, it doesn't have posts, and even if it has posts, they just support the ceiling. So why are we saying over here achsadra does need a mezuzah? So we're talking about not a regular achsadra. This is the achsadra that was used for learning. It was built differently. It had 4 walls. Gemara, achsadra be'rav kinjunim al yasu. Achsadra be'rav is like a regular room. It has 4 walls with a doorway. Why shouldn't it be? Why shouldn't it need mezuzah? So Gemara, achsadra rumisa. It's talking about something called achsadra rumisa, a special Roman achsadra that even though it goes all 4 sides, but it's all windowed. It's like a sunroom. So one might say that those windows didn't have glass in them. It was all open. It was all open to allow the breeze in. So one might say, since it's all open, even though there's a Pesach and I guess there's something there to denote that it's windows as opposed to just being open. So we're talking about over there, achsadra misa, that and even though it's all windows, those windows make it that the doorways are doorways. Amar Chava Amar Rav Yehuda Beher Ziki. We're going to see in a minute what Beher Ziki is. Chayev b'shtei mezuzos, requires 2 mezuzos. My Beher Ziki, what is it? Amar Papa Sabo Mishmei Derav Beishar. It's one of these watchman booths. Hapasuach lechatzer. It's open into the chatzer. Ubatam psuchim lebeishar. And then there's also a house that opens into this booth. So this booth, the way you could picture it is like, imagine a yard. You have a booth right on the inside of the yard, right after you come in. There's a booth that the watchman stays in, and there's a door from that you can get in from the chutzner into that booth. That's where he goes in. It also happens to be next door to this booth. There's a house, and there's a door from this booth into the house. So both of them are valid entrances. One is the entrance to the chutzner, and one is the entrance to the house, and they each need a mezuzah. Then we have another case that's very similar. Tanarabam, Beishar hapasuach legina or lekitainis. This is again a booth, but this booth is situated not by a chatzah. One side, a kitainis, is a room in a house. It's going into a regular house, and the other one is going into a garden. So the door into the house, at least according to the first shot, that's definitely gonna. Well, let's see. Rabbi Yossi as it's going to become clear, we're talking about the door into the gina, into the garden. A garden is not like a chutzner. A garden is not a place that's used for people to live in. It's like a park. So going into the garden doesn't require mezuzah. So the question is this going to be considered like a kitainis or like a beisha? Now we're going to have to explain what the machlekes is. Rav Shmuel Da'ami Shavayu, Begina Lebayis. So the question is going to be, as Rashi explains, the question over here is, what is the status of the doorway going from the Beis Shar, from the booth, into the garden? The one going into the house certainly needs a mezuzah. It's going into a house needs a mezuzah, at least in this pshat. The question is, what about the one going into the garden? So they say, Rav and Shmuel say, depends which direction the hinges on that door go. Like we said, the hinges, the side that the hinges are on, indicate that that's the inside, and the other thing is the outside. You're going into the thing that the hinges are away from. So if the hinges indicate that the normal mode of going through this door is to go from the garden into the Beishar Kulyam Pligi the Chayev. Then everyone will agree it's Chayev. My time, Abiyah the Bayisi. Even though he's going from the Gina into the Beishar, what he's really intending to do is go to the Bayis. And a Bayis is a Makam Dira. So it's considered that he's going from the Gina into the Bayis. Keep Pligi mi Bayis Lagina. But what if it's going the other direction? Mar Savar Kitainisik. So Rabbi Yossi, who said that Yechayev, he holds that the room is the Iker, even though you're going out to the Gina, but this Beis Shar is considered an adjunct of the house, and we disregard the fact that it's going into the
Garden.
into the garden. Doesn't make a difference. We're not going to pay attention to which direction it's going. We still look at it. The house is such a strong indicator. It's such a strong pull that we look at even when someone goes from even though the hinges show that's going out to the garden, we look at it as if it's used to go into the house. We follow the indication of the hinges, and that tells us that he's going out to the garden, therefore it doesn't need a second mezuzah. That was Rav and Shmuel. Rav Yosef, Dami Travayu, and Bayis Lagina, the Kuli Amalei Pli the pot. No, they say the other way around. If you have a hinge indicating that he's going out to the Gina, everyone will agree that you're potter. That's not the question. My time up, Pescha de Ginahu. It shows it's going into the garden. The garden is kavir. It's not that makes the Beishar not a place. Keep pligi migina lebayis. If it indicates that you're going from the Gina into the Bayis. Mar Sava Bia the Bayis. So one man says, even though he's just going into the Beishar, he ultimately is going into the house, and therefore the Beishar has a din of a bias, and it's chashav enough to require a mezuzah. Umasava kula daita degino hu davida. He says no. It's einachanami. Even though it's going megina labayis, but his intention is doing it is to go into to protect the gina. That's what this beishar is really for, and therefore it's going to be potter from a mezuzah. Abai v'Rava Avdi kirabba v'Rav Yosef. Abai and Rava did like Rav and Rav Yosef, which was the second shot. They say will always be potter if the hinges are going toward the Gina, and there's a machlekes the other way. Rav Ashi Avid Kirav Shmuel. They said l'chumra like Rav and Shmuel that it's always going to be chayiv when it's pointing toward the house. L'chumra. V'elchas Kirav Shmuel l'chumra. We pass on Rav and Shmuel. We pass on like Rabbi Yossi, and it's going to be l'chumra. Itma. Lul pasuach min habayis ali. This is not just a complicated case, even though it sounds complicated. It's a staircase going from the first floor of a house to the second floor of the house, and there's a landing on the first floor with a that encloses the staircase, and there's a landing on the second floor that encloses the staircase. Amar Rav Huna im yesh le pesach acher chayiv b'mezuzah achas. If it has only one entrance, meaning if it's only an entrance, there's only a room around it, a door on the bottom floor, then it only needs a mezuzah there. And if it has an entrance on each floor, then it needs on both of them a mezuzah. Amar Pap Shma Mina Rav Huna. We see from Rav Huna, it's not so easy to see how you see this. Hayin Druna de Isle Arba Bavi, a room that has 4 entrances, chayiv ba'arba mezuzas, needs 4 mezuzas. Zak Gemara Pshita. What is the chiddush? We know that it doesn't make sense how many rooms there, how many doors there are into a room. Each one needs a mezuzah. And how are you seeing that from the case of the 2 entrances to the staircase? So even though he normally uses one, that does not exempt the other doors from mezuzah. And we're talking over here by the staircase also, where one of the people has a different way of getting into the house or getting where they're going. So they normally use the other door, and we're saying even so, it still needs a mezuzah. So that will help us also in the case of the 4 doors that even though it's ragal b'chad, you still need a separate mezuzah for each one. Amar Amen. Hai pischa da'akarna. This door that's on a corner. They have a picture of this as well. So it's in the corner of a room, and it goes at a slant over the corner. Chayiv b'mezuzah. It's chayiv. Amalei Rashi lamema plus less light simin. It doesn't have doorposts. That means the doorposts are facing the corner. They're not slanted toward where your entrance is. So the doorposts are for something else and not for this doorway. Amalei Adi Pitsimi, he said, no, it doesn't make this which way they're pointed. There are doorposts. There's posts on each side. There's an end where you enter into the room, and what's on each side is a doorpost. Don't be such a big lamdan and make problems. It's a very funny lashon. Adi Pitsimi. Here are the Pitsimis. You're saying there's no Pitsimi. These are the Pitsimis. Doesn't seem like the most subtle argument. Repapa Ikla Lebei Mar Shmuel. Repapa came to the house of Mar Shmuel. Chazahu Pischa Dele Havale Ela Potem Echad Mismoila. He saw a opening that only had a doorpost on the left side. Va'avida le mezuzah, and he made for it a mezuzah. Meaning, how do you have something that's a doorpost only on one side? You find this often, like if you have a hallway and there's a doorway in the hallway. So on one side you have a flat wall, and the other side it's a doorpost. Or if it even comes to an end at that corner, which is I think the picture that they have. But he says he made a mezuzah. Amalei Kaman, who is this? Like a mayor. So as we're going to see, Rameir holds you make a mezuzah even when there's only one doorpost. Amad Amar Rameir b'yamin, Yismal mi Amar. Zak the Gemara. Where does Rameir say that you put a mezuzah when the doorpost, the part that has a post, is on the right? But in this case, the post was on the left. Rameir would agree that you don't put on that. Mahi. Where did Rameir say? It's the Tanya. Where did he say that you could put on, first of all? Where did he say that you could put on even if there's only one doorpost? The Tanya. Beischa, bi'ascha manei yamin. The Torah says, Beischa, ksafta mal mezuzah is beisecha or bisharecha. Beisecha, we darshan to mean bi'ascha, when you come in. And bi'ascha means min hayamin. Atar mimin ayen el misal, tamin loy me beisecha. Torah says beisecha. It's like my Talmud. I just said a bunch of words, but how do you see from Beisecha and Biyascha, where does it see anything about left and right? Amar Rabba, Derech Biyascha min hayamin. The way he goes in is from the right. Why is that? When a person picks up his leg to move, he first picks up his right leg. The right leg comes first. So Beisecha, we dash to be Biyascha, and Biyascha means from the right. Rav Shmuel bar Acha kamei the Rav Papa Mishmei the Rav Barula Amma Mehacha. The Yikach Yayada HaKoyin Orin Echad, he took a chest. The Yikach Chur B'dalas, he made a hole in its door. V'yitin Oisei Eitzel HaMizbeach Miyamin, he put it on the right of Mizbeach. V'voy Ish Beis Hashem. When people came into the Beis HaMikdash, V'nachnu Shama HaKoyinim Shemei Asaf, it's called HaKesach HaMuva Beis Hashem. They would take all the money that was brought and put it through that hole. But in the middle of this long thing, it said, Eitzel HaMizbeach Miyamin B'voyish. On the right, when the people come, so you see, Bia is a connotation of the right. So that's where we see that you need the right, that the mezuzah is on the right. And Rameh, what does Rameh say that you need only one mezuzah? The Tanya. Abayi she'ein ela patzim echad. Abayi said only has one doorpost. Rameh mechayiv mezuzah b'cham paitrim. Rameh says yechayiv l'usay yepat. My time in the Rabbanon, what's the reason for the Rabbanon? Mezuzah's ksiv. It says mezuzah, so lashon rabbin, so that means two mezuzahs. You need two doorposts. My time in the Rameh, the Tanya mezuzahs. Shemeani miyot mezuzahs. Shtayim. That would tell you that you have to have two doorposts. Then it says in the second pasuk again mezuzahs. But parsha shniya she'ein tav loimer. There's no need for the Torah to say they have a riba acharibut. They in riba achariyat ela lemayit. Miyatar kasav lemezuzah achas. Divrei Rabbi Shmuel. This is where Rabbi Shmuel understands Rabbi Meir. That's a miyat achamiyat and ein miyat achamiyat ela l'rabis. Ein riba acharibu ela lemayit. So it's going to tell you that you only need one. Rabbi Kiva has a different way that Rabbi Meir says, where Rabbi Meir learns that you only need one mezuzah. Ein Tzarech does not need to say this. Drashik Shuaimer ala mashkef al shtei hamezuzahs. Torah says on the mashkef that they put the blood on the mashkef on the upper post and on the shtei mezuzahs. She'en tam loy shtei. What does it have to shtei mezuzahs? A normal door has shtei mezuzahs. Just say ala mezuzahs. Matam loy shtei zebon av kol makom shenem mezuzahs ein ela achas. Ach yifel v'akasav shtayim. The fact that the Torah said shtei mezuzahs, that means every other place it's not shtei mezuzahs. It's only by putting the dam in Mitzrayim that you need on both mezuzahs. But a regular mezuzah you only need one mashkef. Tana Rabbanim. Kesaftem yachal yichtaven al avonim. The Torah says uksaftem al mezuzahs. You should write it on the mezuzahs. So one would think Those days they made stone houses. They made it out of brick. There was no sheetrock or any of that stuff. A brick house was bricks. So maybe you should write the parsha of the mezuzah on the brick, on the actual doorpost, and write it on the brick. Nemar kan ksiva v'nemar lalon ksiva. It says ksiva by the mezuzah, and it says ksiva by the get isha. Mal alon ala sefer, afkan ala sefer. Just like over there by the isha, it means on a parchment. So too over here it means on a parchment. Maybe it doesn't mean that. Nemar kan ksiva v'nemar lalon ksiva. It says the pasuk says ksafta al havonim es kol divrei hatayra azois be'er heitev. Right when the Yidden crossed, came to the Yarden, they wrote it. They wrote the Torah on stones. So maybe maybe we should learn from there that it should be on the mezuzah, on the doorpost. Which one should we compare it to? Maybe we should do the one that's permanent, which is the writing of a get. It has the same din always. You always write it on a parchment. So we learn out the mezuzah from the get, which is permanent. The writing of the Torah on the stone is obviously not, that was just a one-time thing. He said, Baruch said, call to me, say over these things. And I'll write it on the sefer, it's talking about a sefer Torah, that you write it on a parchment, not on a stone. Amalei Rav Acha. This is the source that you write a get and all other things on a stone on a parchment. Amalei Rav Acha Brei Rav Ashi Rachman al Mezuzos v'at Amr Neil Ksiva Ksiva. He says the Torah says al Mezuzos, and the Torah says to do it one way. You're making drashos of Gzeir. The Torah said do it on the mezuzahs. Why don't you take it literally and do it on the doorpost? You can't use Gzeir Shava to turn over the Pashta Pshat, the translation of a pasuk. So there, Amakro Ksaftim, Ksiva Tama. The Torah says you need a Ksiva Tama, you need a full Ksiva. And the Gemara understands that writing on stone is not a Ksiva Tama. Rashi says because it doesn't last. It's going to eventually fade away. It's gonna go away. Then it says on the mezuzahs. So then it says al mezuzahs. First you write ksiva tama on the parchment, and then you put the parchment on the mezuzahs. Now we're learning out from ksiva tama that it can't be on the doorpost. What do you do with the gzeir shava to the ksiva of a get? So you may allow gzeir shava amina lichta avna v'likva seifa. Maybe you should engrave it. They don't contemplate the idea of engraving. You don't engrave things that are already on the doorpost once it's built. But maybe you take a rock and you engrave it into that rock, and that will be a ksiva tama, and you take that and put it on the doorpost. So tomorrow, Kamash Falon, the Gzeir Shava tells you, no, you do it like we get. So tomorrow, Arba Parshi Shebitfilim Ma'akva Zu Azu. Bafil Ksav Echad Ma'akva. The Arba Tfilis and Parshis and Tfilin, you need all of them, and if you're missing even one, it's Ma'akav. So Gemara Pshita, that was from the Mishnah, L'charetz Pasha. Of course, you need everything. You need every dot of the yud. You obviously can't be missing any part of the ksiva. So it's coming to tell you, if it doesn't have surrounding all around it, it will be possible. So this is what we saw by the same thing. The same will apply by the tefillin. Okay, we'll stop over here. Have a good tvach. Let's 10 to 8 tomorrow.